Camilla Dawson had faced many battles in life, but in that chilly New York airport, just moments away from boarding her flight home, she never imagined she would endure one of the most humiliating moments of her career. Not because of her legal decisions, but because of how she looked. Standing in the business class line, surrounded by men in suits and women with designer luggage, she could feel the piercing glances that silently screamed, "You don't belong here." Camilla was a federal judge, held a PhD, and had international prestige. But to the well-dressed, furious white woman behind her, none of that mattered. And to the two officers who would soon approach, even less so. In one of the most tightly monitored airports in the world, credentials and composure weren't enough. Being black was all it took. What started as an absurd misunderstanding quickly escalated into a scandal with institutional repercussions. But before it made headlines, it was pain, it was humiliation, and it was resistance. This is the story of a woman who refused to lower her head, a story too real to ignore. And powerful, enough to make us question what justice truly means. It was late afternoon at New York City's airport. The eternal shuffle of rolling suitcases, announcements in multiple languages, and hurried passengers created a nearly choreographed scene. Among them walked a figure with quiet elegance. Camilla Dawson, a 47-year-old Brazilian federal judge, dressed in refined attire, her posture firm. She had just spoken at a legal conference on constitutional rights and was heading back to São Paulo, where a mountain of legal cases awaited her expert eye. She wasn't one to flaunt her status, though she had every reason to. She preferred to blend in, something she ironically almost never managed. Being a black woman in elite spaces always drew attention, rarely for the right reasons. As she approached the business class boarding area, she felt the stares, some curious, others scrutinizing. But one gaze in particular felt like invisible, thorns against her skin. Vivian Stokes, a white woman with perfectly tied hair, designer clothes, and a face hardened by years of disdain. She watched Camilla as if the judge had trespassed on sacred ground. Camilla pretended not to notice. She was used to it. She went through check-in with poise, placed her documents on the counter, and smiled softly. Everything seemed routine. But across the way, Vivian never took her eyes off her. She squirmed with unease, convinced that something, or someone, didn't belong. Once seated in the waiting area, Camilla pulled a dense book on comparative jurisprudence from her bag and began reading. She valued airport time as a rare moment for silent reflection, but it wouldn't last long. Vivienne was already marching toward an airport staffer, visibly agitated, gesturing and pointing at Camilla. Though her words couldn't be heard, their meaning was clear. She questioned how a woman like her could be in business class, suggested fraud, raised concerns about security and passports. The employee tried to calm her down, but Vivian wouldn't budge. A security guard was called. Minutes later, two officers arrived, James Corwin and Eric Sandler. Camilla, still absorbed in her book, had no idea she had become a problem. The kind of problem logic can't explain, only prejudice. The tension in the terminal rose like pressure before a storm. Nothing had happened. Yet. But what was about to unfold would mark this ordinary day forever. An invisible line had just been crossed, and Camilla unwillingly stood at the heart of a battle she hadn't chosen. Vivian Stokes wasn't used to waiting or sharing space with people she didn't approve of. Watching Camilla sit in the business class lounge ignited something in her. Not just discomfort, a twisted certainty that something was wrong. In her mind, the wrong had a color, an accent, and agenda. Dressed in a Chanel suit, expensive rings sparkling on her fingers, she marched stiffly in indignation. She eyed Camilla from head to toe, hunting for flaws to justify her irritation. Maybe she used someone else's miles, maybe she's married to someone rich, or maybe she shouldn't be here at all. she muttered to herself, unable to accept that a poised black woman could simply belong in that space. Camilla noticed. Of course she did. Those looks weren't new. Words weren't necessary when eyes already shouted, "You're not welcome here." But as always, she kept her composure. Continued reading, breathing deeply, pretending not to notice. Even as every second of tension weighed on her like a stone, Vivienne wasn't satisfied with silent judgment. She got up and approached the airline counter, where a young agent greeted her with a professional smile. She didn't smile back. "I'd like to file a complaint," she said curtly. "There's a woman over there who's, well, it's suspicious. She doesn't look like someone who flies business class. Can you check her ticket?" The agent, caught off guard, tried to remain calm. "Ma'am, if her ticket was validated, there's nothing to question. Everyone in this lounge is authorized to be here. I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm asking you to do your job." Vivienne snapped, raising her voice. "She might be using fake documents. Look at her." The agent was visibly uncomfortable. Still, he explained that he couldn't break protocol based on subjective suspicions, but Vivienne was already dialing airport security. Soon after, officers James Corwin and Eric Sandler arrived, both white, both experienced, but with very different demeanors. James, more impulsive, seemed to absorb Vivienne's indignation like a mission. Eric, more reserved, followed his partner, but not without visible discomfort. Vivienne approached them with frantic gestures, as if reporting a serious crime. "She's right there. I don't think she's supposed to be here. Look, I have a right to feel safe." Camilla noticed the commotion. She saw the officers approaching and instinctively put her book away. This wasn't new, but it hurt every time as if it were. The silent judgment was about to be voiced, and this time, the justice she so often delivered for others would have to be used to defend herself. The officer's firm footsteps cut through the room like an invisible siren. James Corwin and Eric Sandler approached with the demeanor of men who had already decided someone was guilty. Camilla looked up calmly, a calmness forged through years. In courtrooms, where she had learned to stand strong even in the face of ignorance or hostility, James was blunt. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us for a routine check." Camilla raised an eyebrow, surprised, but stayed polite. "Is there a problem with my flight?" "We received a report. We need to verify your identity and the reason you're in this area," he said, not even entertaining the idea the report might be false. She retrieved her ID wallet and calmly presented her diplomatic passport and official credentials. She was a federal judge and interim president of Brazil's Court of Appeals, attending the legal event as an international observer. But James didn't read. He scanned suspiciously. Eric, beside him, hesitated. "This could be fake," James muttered to his partner loud enough for Camilla to hear. "There's nothing wrong with my documents," she replied, her tone firmer. "And even if there were, protocol would dictate a different procedure, wouldn't it?" James ignored her. His eyes revealed more than doubt. They showed contempt disguised as diligence. Vivienne watched from a distance, a slight smile on her lips. She felt validated, as though she had won some imaginary battle. The woman she had deemed out of place was now surrounded by men in uniform. To her, this was justice. Camilla saw it all clearly. This wasn't about security. It was about identity, about color, about place, and how her quiet, dignified presence offended those who believed only inherited privilege deserved respect. She tried to reason. "I know how this works. I know that in situations like this there are protocols. None of them involve exposing me like this, publicly, without a clear justification." But James wasn't listening. He had made up his mind. And the fact that she held her head high only irritated him more. He couldn't accept being challenged, especially by a woman he believed didn't belong there. Eric, still silent, looked over the documents again. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face, but he didn't intervene. Hierarchy spoke louder than doubt. Camilla took a deep breath. She knew the thin line between respect and abuse was about to be crossed. But she also knew that even when justice goes silent, truth has power, and in that moment, she decided she would not step back. Camilla Dawson kept her gaze fixed on the officers, not with hostility, but with the unwavering firmness of someone who knows her rights and demands they be respected. Inside, her heart pounded. It wasn't fear. It was restrained indignation. Dozens of passengers now whispered, recorded discreetly, and speculated about the unfolding scene. And as always, she knew one wrong move, one misinterpreted gesture, and the narrative would turn against her. "You want to know why I'm here?" Camilla said, her voice raised slightly. "I'm here because I bought my ticket with my own money, because I have every right to be wherever I choose, and because I've spent the last few days discussing democracy and justice with legal representatives from various countries, including the United States." James crossed his arms, skeptical. He seemed more threatened by her composure than convinced by any suspicion. "All this wouldn't be necessary if you'd just cooperate." "Cooperate with what?" she countered, standing now but keeping her tone even. "With your prejudice. With the paranoia of a woman who couldn't bear to see me here." Vivienne, watching from behind, turned red with fury. Her complaint had turned into a mirror, and now she was the one out of place. Eric finally stepped in, trying to restore some rationality. "Maybe we should confirm with the embassy or the consulate. Her documents seem legitimate." James brushed him off. "That's not your call right now," he snapped. "You still haven't explained how you got this diplomatic passport." Camilla stepped forward. She felt the eyes on her, the weight of the moment, but she wouldn't bow. Not here. Not in this theater of absurdity. "I'm a federal judge, Mr. Corwin, and I'm currently serving as acting president of Brazil's Court of Appeals. I attended an internationally recognized legal event as an official representative. If you'd like, I can call the Ministry of Foreign Affairs right now, or perhaps you'd prefer I have the Brazilian ambassador come here." The mention of Itamaraty, Brazil's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, seemed to crack the floor beneath them. Eric visibly tensed. James hesitated for a split second, then responded with aggression. "We're not here to be threatened." "This isn't a threat. It's a warning," Camilla said calmly. "You still have time to do the right thing, to walk away from this with a shred of professional dignity. But if you keep this up, tomorrow's headline won't be about me." Silence fell. For a moment, no one spoke. But Camilla's eyes said everything. She was not a victim. She was a force. And even in the face of uniformed intolerance, she refused to be reduced to a suspect. Her existence, her presence there, was legitimate, and her dignity non-negotiable. Camilla's firm stance, precise words and clarity had shifted the power dynamic, but for James Corwin, every word from her was a direct blow to his authority. He didn't see a judge. He saw a black woman daring to challenge him publicly, with witnesses and with poise. For him, that was unacceptable. He stepped too close, invading her space to assert dominance. Camilla didn't flinch. Eric, now visibly uneasy, turned slightly, scanning the room as if seeking backup. Several passengers were recording. The tension was now visible, filmable, viral. "Ma'am, I'm asking you one last time, come with us without resistance," James said through clenched teeth. "And I'll say this one last time. I'm presenting legal documents. There's no indication of a crime, and you have no legal grounds for forced detainment. What's happening here is abuse of authority, and it's all being recorded." That last sentence lit the fuse. "Enough!" James shouted, pushing her arm slightly to grab her belongings. "You're coming with us now." Eric grabbed his partner's arm, trying to de-escalate. "James, calm down. This is getting out of hand." But it was too late. Consumed by rage, wounded pride, and veiled racism, James ignored everything. "She's resisting," he yelled, justifying his move. In seconds, he pulled out the handcuffs and spun Camilla around. She resisted, not with force, but with words. "This is a mistake, a serious one, and you will answer for it." Still, she was restrained. There was no extreme physical violence, but the act, handcuffing a diplomatic authority without cause, was already scandalous, especially in front of outraged witnesses, some of whom were now questioning the officers aloud. "What did she do?" a man behind Vivian asked, who now looked visibly uncomfortable for the first time. "Nothing. She just existed," a woman answered, holding up her phone, clearly recording. Camilla was led out of the VIP lounge in handcuffs, paraded through the terminal like a criminal. Yet even as her body was subdued, her expression remained composed. She didn't bow her head. She looked straight ahead, as if silently declaring, "I know who I am, and now so will you." Eric followed close behind, his face tense, clearly regretting not stepping in sooner. James, still puffed up, tried to maintain control he had already lost. Vivienne, watching the final scene, felt a strange chill in her chest. Perhaps just for a second she realized she had crossed a line she never should have. But it was too late. Justice, which had seemed silent until now, was beginning to awaken. The metallic clink of handcuffs echoed through the airport halls. Camilla walked among passengers like a prisoner of war, not for any crime, but for daring to exist in a space prejudice had denied her. The humiliation was evident, but her posture remained upright. Though wounded, her dignity held firm in her eyes. Eric stayed close, silent. He glanced at the recording phones, the surprised faces, the confused airport staff. It was clear something was wrong, that this scene broke all protocols. But James marched ahead, inflated by a power now showing its darkest face, authoritarianism. In the security room, Camilla was seated. James stepped away to verify information, while Eric lingered, visibly uneasy. She used the moment to breathe deeply and take in her surroundings. A mix of rage and strategy filled her mind. She knew she couldn't lose control, and that every moment of this absurdity had to be remembered in surgical detail. "You know this is illegal, right?" she said, looking directly at Eric. He hesitated but replied, "I don't have the authority to overrule my partner." "But you have a conscience, don't you?" Camilla responded. "Because that's what you'll face when all of this comes to light." Eric looked away. He knew she was right. Outside, a commotion had begun. Passengers who witnessed the incident started questioning airport staff. Some approached the airline. Others were already posting videos online. The story was leaking, and reactions had started. Meanwhile, Vivian Stokes had disappeared. Perhaps fearing backlash, perhaps realizing her social cleansing attempt had spiraled out of control. Camilla then requested a phone call. It was denied. She insisted calmly and firmly, citing international treaties, diplomatic rights, and her role in Brazil. When James returned and heard this, he laughed mockingly. "A judge? Sure. And I'm the President of the United States." But his arrogance was about to crumble. In her bag, left nearby, were more than documents: letters of recommendation, official invitations, diplomatic badges with international emblems. A complete dossier that, once reviewed, would make clear who she was and how grave their mistake had been. She looked at Eric again. "There's still time to stop this from getting worse, but if you keep going along with it, you'll go down with it." That moment tipped the scale. Eric chose to act. He requested that supervisors be called. He said there were inconsistencies in the handling. For the first time, someone decided to listen, even if late. A turning point was coming, and with it, the beginning of the end of this injustice. The wait in the security room felt like slow motion. Camilla remained seated, her wrists still marked from the freshly removed handcuffs. The tension had now shifted from the eyes of onlookers to the inner halls of authority. The arrival of senior officers was imminent, and with them, the truth would begin to assert itself. Eric, now visibly worried, paced back and forth. He no longer tried to hide his discomfort. He had notified his sector supervisor and explained that the detained woman claimed to be a high-ranking federal judge from Brazil. Even saying it quietly, he felt the weight of those words. Because if it were true, and all signs pointed that way, the mistake could have serious diplomatic consequences. Minutes later, 2 senior officers arrived. One of them, Lieutenant Randall Myers, introduced himself with firmness but no arrogance. After hearing the report, he immediately requested Camilla's documents. She silently handed over her diplomatic passport, the international conference badge, and an official letter from Brazil's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, signed and stamped. Randall read through everything, then looked up. The mood shifted. "You're the acting president of Brazil's Court of Appeals?" he asked, visibly surprised. Camilla simply nodded. Randall slowly turned to James Corwin. "Did you know this?" "She said that after, but we thought it was fake," James replied, his tone now unsure. "Thought or assumed?" the lieutenant asked sternly. "Did you verify the documents before cuffing her?" James hesitated. Eric stepped in. "Sir, I asked that we wait to verify. I was ignored. She presented her documents from the start." Camilla, now standing, took a deep breath. Her voice was low but firm. "I warned you. I told you who I was. I showed the documents. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And that choice had a color, a shape, and an intention." Randall ordered her immediate release, offering an institutional apology. But Camilla didn't want just an apology. She wanted accountability. And from that moment on, everything shifted. An immediate investigation was ordered. The International Relations Department was notified. The Brazilian consulate was informed. Within hours, the news hit outlets in both countries. A Brazilian federal judge, with diplomatic immunity, had been wrongfully and humiliatingly detained on American soil, purely because of prejudice. James was suspended from duty immediately. Eric was summoned for an internal hearing. The airport police station became the epicenter of an institutional crisis that would make headlines in the coming hours. And Camilla? She kept her composure, as always. But inside, she carried more than indignation. She felt her personal pain had become a public symbol. Her story, at last, had moved beyond the terminal walls, becoming a cry for justice the world could no longer ignore. The hours after Camilla's official identity was confirmed were marked by institutional frenzy. What had started as just another routine incident in the eyes of the officers now had diplomatic, political, and media implications. The information spread fast. A Brazilian judge with diplomatic status had been wrongly detained at one of the most secure airports in the world. And the reason? No real threat. Just prejudice. The Brazilian consulate contacted the airport's legal team, demanding formal explanations. Meanwhile, the American press began investigating. Passenger-recorded videos circulated on social media with captions like "Justice for Camilla," "First-class racism," and "international disgrace." Within hours, her name was trending on both sides of the Atlantic. James Corwin, the officer who led the confrontation, was summoned for immediate questioning. His tone had changed entirely. Gone was the firmness, replaced by defensive explanations. He claimed to be following security protocols, responding to a concerning report, and insisted he had no intent to discriminate. But the footage, the testimonies, the ignored documents, all told a different story. The Internal Affairs Department launched an urgent investigation. Political, international, and public pressure mounted. Camilla's name, once seen by him as just a suspect, was now synonymous with accountability. Vivian Stokes, the woman who triggered the entire incident with her unfounded accusation, didn't escape scrutiny. Once the videos confirmed her identity, she became the target of public outrage. Her actions were labeled severe racial discrimination, and she faced formal charges of defamation and incitement to discrimination. At the same time, Camilla received calls of support from legal institutions, court presidents, judges' associations, and even political leaders from Brazil voiced solidarity. This wasn't just about her. It was about everything she represented, a black woman in power who refused to bow. Amid the storm, she remained calm. She gave a brief statement to the press. "What happened to me is what happens daily to millions of anonymous people. The only difference is that this time, the person in the crosshairs knew exactly how to respond and had the proof." That statement echoed across legal circles, a piercing reminder that the system often only listens when the target has power. But Camilla wanted more than her own justice. She wanted change. She wanted no woman, anywhere, to be handcuffed simply for existing in the wrong place. And at that moment, those who once held the power now tasted the bitter flavor of panic, not from a real threat, but because finally they were being held accountable. Camilla boarded her flight back to São Paulo the next morning, not as someone fleeing, but as someone returning from a battle. Marked, but victorious. In the quiet of the business-class cabin, she looked out the window as the plane lifted off. Outside, the world seemed unchanged, but within her something had shifted forever. She knew she wasn't the first and wouldn't be the last. How many black women, how many competent professionals, how many worthy people had been silenced? Without cameras, without witnesses, without a chance to defend themselves. The difference this time was that she had a voice, and she used it not just for herself, but as an echo for all the others who'd been silenced. What happened at New York's airport wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a raw portrait of a system that still measures human worth by skin color, by accent, by origin. And when someone like Camilla occupies spaces historically denied to them, the system, or parts of it, reacts as if under attack. But maybe that reaction is the clearest sign that we're on the right path, because every time someone's presence is more disturbing than their absence, it means they're breaking something old, something uncomfortable, something necessary, the silence of exclusion. Camilla's story doesn't end with justice served. It ends with a question. How many more times will this happen before it no longer needs to happen? And it's with that question that we leave you, not to close the story, but so that it may continue in every questioning glance, every act of resistance, every voice that refuses to be silenced, because the next video may not be about a judge, it might be about someone like me or you.